Okay, everybody, it's just after 7, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for tonight's SEAC meeting, Go Leafs Go. I encourage updates. If you happen to have them come to your phone, please feel free to share those as the meeting goes on. So we are going to go ahead, just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. When you are speaking, please just hit the button on your microphone so that we can make sure it gets picked up for the recording. And yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so we're just going to start. So call to order. We'll start with our opening prayer and our land acknowledgement. Give us 1 second. In the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We come together in hope from different community groups, answering the same call to service, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in gratitude for the trust placed in us, for the opportunity to serve, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in respect, aware of our diversity, willing to work for the good, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in awe of the wonder and beauty of each of God's children, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in God's name, and as we work together toward the same goal, each piece of the puzzle begins to fit neatly into place, creating a breathtaking picture of love, compassion, courage, and grace. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and now our land acknowledgement.
Fulton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis,
from the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lakes
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect
for direction, land,
waters, plants,
animals,
and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God.
We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Great, thanks very much, Andrea. So moving on to items 1.2, we have the approval of the agenda. So everybody would have received a copy of the agenda in your meeting package. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the approval of the agenda? Okay, seeing none, could I ask for a mover and a seconder?
I'll move it.
Thanks, moved by Trish. Can I get a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, seconded by Rick. Okay, item number 2, we have declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest this evening? Okay, seeing none. We move on to item number 3. We do have a presentation this evening. We have a presentation by the Senior Manager of Human Rights and Equity, Sita Jayaraman. Thank you, Sita. I know that you are just back and we're so grateful for your time. So over to you.
Every aspect of everything that we do. Thank you. In education. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to share with you today. If I can request you to just go on to the next slide, please. So when we talk about sort of the mandate or the why are we doing this work, it's really looking at, what do we stand for in Catholic education? When you look at our faith formation theme, what does it say? What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, love kindness, and to walk humbly. So that do justice piece is what ties in so beautifully to the work of human rights and equity. So our faith formation theme really provides the foundation for the why we have to do this work. And justice really requires us to do action, not just justice in thought and ideology and commitment, but justice in action to dismantle systemic barriers so that all students can achieve, believe, and belong. Next slide, please. So we've talked about sort of the foundation and the faith formation piece, but I also wanted to highlight that human rights and equity is both, not just both, is moral, legal, and ministry mandate, right? So the work is really sort of anchored in all those pieces. First, I want to speak about a key piece of the puzzle, which is looking at understanding Indigenous rights and how that works and plays into this idea of human rights and equity. Indigenous rights is, of course, the foundation. This is the land that we're on, so it's important for us to understand and acknowledge that, and also infuse that in all aspects of education, curriculum, science, geography, history, etc., etc. Talked about the Catholic social teaching piece already, that it's grounded in our faith formation theme. And I really like this quote from Pope Francis, which speaks to this idea again of justice. And unless there is justice for everybody, there is no peace. So again, it's not just justice for 90% of our students or 95%, it's for 100% of all our students. So this work is rooted in that. And the other two pieces are human rights and equity. So human rights really is about the Ontario Human Rights Code. And so it's a legal obligation for every one of us in education to uphold the Ontario Human Rights Code. And if we don't do so, then we're in violation of the Human Rights Code, which is a quasi-constitutional law, and that we need to look at how we need to uphold that. And the equity piece is really interesting, and that's why human rights and equity always go hand in hand, is the human rights lens, which is the law, really tells us that we need to uphold the law. And the equity piece allows us to understand where is that justice not being done. Who are those students that are not achieving, believing, and belonging at the same level? So that equity piece is a really important key for us to get to justice, to uphold human rights, and to understand what it means when we talk about Indigenous rights. Next slide, please. So I talked about the ministry mandate, that this work is really sort of what the ministry asks of all school boards to do. And this is nothing new. It started when you talk about equity and inclusive education. It started way back in 2009 with Ontario's Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy. And over the years, the government has issued many documents that speak to what is the roadmap, how do we get there, what is the action plan. And so from 2009 onwards to 2014 and 2017, we've had many directives from the government on how this work needs to be done, and sort of what is the roadmap to get us to equity and inclusive education for all students. And I also wanted to highlight the Ontario First Nations, Métis and Inuit Education Policy Framework, which actually predates even the Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy. So this is not a new fad or something that we're suddenly doing now. It's been ongoing, and it's been a government mandate, a Ministry of Education mandate for a number of years now. And one of the things that the Ontario's Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy talked about was really that every school board must have an equity and inclusive education policy. Next slide, please. And so we also have our policy. It's on our website. And if you haven't had a chance to read this incredibly fascinating 14-page document, please do so now. And it really speaks to all those ministry directives in terms of how do we realize this promise of diversity and inclusion for all students? So our policy is premised on 8 key pillars, and shout out to our communications department who helped to create this visual that highlights each of those 8 pillars. But I want to really draw your attention to the first one right at the top, which says that equity and inclusion is a lens. And what that means is every piece of curriculum, document, policy, practice that we have at the board, at this board, has to have equity and inclusion at its heart. So must bring that understanding, must bring that that value to it. And as in any other field, even the language around equity and inclusion has evolved over the years. So this is a document that was originally created in 2011, I believe. And at the time, people still talked about equity and inclusion as a lens. Over the years, even that language has evolved, and people are staying away from that language of lens, because lens is like a glass. You can take it off and you no longer have the lens. So they're really talking about embedding equity and inclusion in everything that we do. And then there's many other pillars around, that the fact that this work is not just the work of any one individual, it's a shared and committed leadership for everybody. It's about how we build those full community relationships in ways that we are engaging stakeholders that we don't always engage with and that we don't always, partner with. It's about what's being taught in the classroom, the inclusive curriculum piece, whose voices are missing, whose voices are centered. Is it a Eurocentric curriculum? Is it a curriculum that really builds on our students' identities and their ways of knowing and being? It's about religious accommodation. So as per the Ontario Human Rights Code, our board has a legal obligation to provide religious accommodation where requested, and to make sure that people can practice their religion in a way that's that they can do so freely. The blue pillar is really one that's very important for us, the prevention of discrimination and harassment. So we've done a lot of work, policies, procedures, looking at how do we create learning environments that are free of discrimination and harassment. And maybe you've heard of our policy VI 102, which speaks to how to respond to hate or bias motivated incidents. It's also a commitment to ongoing professional development. And lastly, but equally importantly, important is the accountability and transparency piece. So we're doing all this work, so what? How do we make sure that we communicate that out to stakeholders? How do we keep ourselves accountable? So these 8 pillars form sort of the basis for the work that we do in terms of equity and inclusive education at the board. Next slide, please. So when we think about human rights and equity, we have to sort of see it in the big picture of what do we mean when we talk about systemic oppression? What does that look like? What are these words meaning? So I wanted to sort of give you sort of a visual that when we talk about human rights and equity and anti-oppression, it's not just one thing. There are many issues that come up with that. So whether you look at settler colonialism, and you might have heard Sherry Sable talk about, what it means when we talk about settler colonialism, what happened, with the colonization of Canada and the erasure of Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples. It can also be another pillar is race and racism, and within race and racism, we need to understand issues of how does anti-Black racism, manifest in education? What does anti-Asian racism look like, et cetera, et cetera. It looks at issues of sexuality and sexual orientation in terms of, homophobia. How does that look like in education? It can be based on gender, based on religion, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, et cetera, and based on ability. So, how does ableism come up in education? How does that exclude students with disabilities from participating and achieving their full potential? Because education systems are not set up for these groups to succeed in the same way that it prioritizes and centers students from dominant backgrounds and identities to do this work. So when we talk about equity, we really need to keep this big picture in our mind. It's not about just one issue. Equally important, if you don't mind flipping to the next slide, please, is for us to understand that, yes, there are many issues that we need to be addressing when we talk about equity and inclusive education. But we also need to understand that our students are not unidimensional human beings, right? They come with so many different aspects of their identity. So when I come to this room, I come to you identifying as female, racialized, I was an immigrant many years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at our students, we must consider all those identities that impact their experiences. So whether it's students with disabilities and intersecting with race or intersecting with, a sexual orientation or many others. So we can never look at one person as this is your only identity. We must always take that intersectional approach. And even, whether we talk about students with disability, whether we talk about others, we must always consider all the other identities that impact their experiences and what barriers those pose and how we need to address those. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you very briefly some of the work that's been happening on an ongoing basis through the Department of Human Rights and Equity. And I'm so proud to say now we have a department, which is quite a leap from where we were. We have a Human Rights and Equity officer and a Human Rights and Equity advisor and an admin person as well to sort of really pull the work forward. And we've done a lot of ongoing professional development. And here's just a sample of some of the, part 1, 8 module sessions, part 2, 4 modules, numerous PD opportunities, looking at procedure. I mentioned responding to a hate or bias motivated incidents procedure. We're also recently working on an infographic on hate speech against people with disabilities. It's an ongoing project that we're working on with different administrators and student groups, looking at policy, looking at student and workforce data analysis. And I mentioned this again to highlight the fact that when we talk about human rights and equity, it doesn't just rest with the Human Rights and Equity Department. It has immediate connections to curriculum. So we work very closely with curriculum to say, who are we centering? Whose experiences are we centering? Who are we holding up as the knowledge keepers? Is it always only, male dominated or Eurocentric role models that we speak about? We work with student success to say, oh, so who are those students who are graduating? Who are those that are not graduating? How do we understand these intersectional identities to say who is not succeeding? We work with, safe schools to say, okay, so when we look at things like expulsions and suspensions, how do we bring that critical lens and understanding of who is, impacted and who's perhaps more impacted through disciplinary practices than other students. So again, this work is not in isolation, and this really has to permeate through every department. Over the last few years, I've really been very blessed to work with Jody and with Denise and Spec Ed to look at even things like, culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy in terms of assessment tools, in the department, what kinds of tools, and I'm not the expert on this, and perhaps Denise or Jody can speak to this, is, how do we even look at the assessment tools? How do we look at how we're teaching students? How can we build on what they're familiar with and their identity so that it becomes easier for them to, to learn and to engage and to develop those skills? So, or even navigating difficult conversations with families with that intersectional lens of, disability and race, for example. So we've done a lot of work. And there's still a lot more work to be done, of course. But again, I just wanted to highlight that it's important that we continue to keep that critical lens of making sure that human rights and equity is really embedded and sustained in the work that we do, in all the work that we do. And I want to just leave you with the next slide. Is we recently published a newsletter, which we're really proud of, which speaks to some of the work that's been happening in the Human Rights and Equity Department, and speaks to, the ongoing work both within the department, but also select highlights from different schools. And I think it's important that we share this work because I find that people often don't know in the community, and I've made a sincere commitment to communicate regularly so that parents and community members understand what is it that we do and what is it that we can do better. So I hope I've been able to give you a big picture sense of what is it that we're doing and how we work. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Thanks, Sita. Does anybody have any questions at all? We can send around a link to that newsletter. Andrew, if we can make a note, we'll send that out to everybody so that they can see that work in a follow-up. That'd be great. Thank you, Sita, for mentioning that. And if anybody does have any questions at any point during, our discussions or meetings or anything that just come up, just, feel free to reach out to Sita or someone in her department now, and they're always happy to be helpful and very responsive. So thank you very much, Sita, for presenting to us this evening.
Thank you so much.
We are moving to item number 4, which is of the minutes. Again, we will have received a copy
Thanks. Yeah, I did have one question with regards to the policy, and it does mention that a motion was made and withdrawn. But I believe because the motion was moved and seconded, it was on the floor and discussed. I think the motion belongs in the minutes with the mover and seconder and then saying that it was withdrawn. I think that's the proper way to do it.
So my understanding is that the process that was followed with respect to the minutes is how we will typically do our minutes for that. And I know there was some consultation done with some of the other staff on that, but I can confirm that and get back to you on that.
Yes, please, if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you.
So we'll just leave that for now and we'll come back to those minutes at the next meeting. Okay, moving on to item number 5, business arising from previous meetings. There's a summary of outstanding items from previous meetings that was in your agenda package. I do want to bring to your attention that there was one item on there that we spoke about last meeting with respect to how we bring items forward for so if there's recommendations or there's specific items that come out from an advisory committee, how is that actually brought forward for consideration and review? So I have put a notice of motion on the table at the last board meeting. It'll be coming to the next board meeting to be discussed and debated. I am happy to read that to you if you wanted to hear it. So the notice of motion is entitled Board Response to Committee Recommendations. Whereas school board trustees are locally elected public representatives who serve as the community's advocate for public education. And whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board values relationships and partnerships and is committed to providing meaningful feedback mechanisms for all stakeholders. Whereas parent and community committees such as the Special Education Advisory Committee, the Catholic Parent Involvement Committee, and HCDSB Catholic School Councils are intended to serve as a link between community partners and the Halton Catholic District School Board. And whereas there is currently no policy or procedure in place to outline the process by which HCDSB committees may submit recommendations to the Board of Trustees, be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board direct the Policy Committee to revisit and revise the HCDSB procedural bylaw to include a clear and consistent process for the Board of Trustees to receive and respond to recommendations by the HCDSB committees. So like I said, that will be on the next board meeting agenda where we will, hopefully I'll have a seconder for the motion, but hopefully I'll get to the floor, we'll have a conversation and then we'll see where it goes from there. So that item has been addressed on our business arising. Is there any other questions with respect to items on the business arising? Maria?
I just want to say thanks for bringing that notice of motion forward. I guess the other piece is it was recommended by SEAC as well, so it's been kind of out there for a little while. So glad to see it moving forward and good luck with it at the board table.
Thank you. Okay, so is there any other questions on the business arising at all? Okay, great. So we're moving on to item number 6, and I'm going to pass this over to Superintendent Rossini with respect to the Special Education Board Policy Review. As we know, it had come up at our last meeting, Policy II-13, which is psychoeducational psychological assessments of individual students. There was some back and forth in our email correspondence, so you will have seen that, and I will pass it over to Superintendent Rossini to address.
Thank you. In the spirit of trying to marry some of the ideas that were provided to us, I'm going to make some suggestions as to some changes. Where you see in blue, can you see it large enough or is it just not? Yeah, if you don't mind. Thank you. That's good. So where you see, I'm going to pull a teacher, I think. Here, assessment practices shall be fully accessible in that whole entire statement. We're suggesting that when you go up to the first red portion, oh, I can't help this. It's okay. Sorry. We're going to suggest that the planning, administration, and interpretation of the assessment must be made carefully, recognizing the student's individual accessibility needs, culture, and linguistic background. So that encapsulates that comment around accessibility that was suggested by a SEAC member.
Excuse me for a second. Do you mind making it just a tiny bit? I can't.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. No, because I think we need to chat about this. So Andrea, if you could put in, please, recognizing the students' individual accessibility needs right in that space. Right here. Sorry. That's okay. Right between students and culture.
Sorry, can I make a point of order, please?
Sure, Maria, what's your point of order?
Can this be shared with us? Because this is really hard to follow and we had like other versions that we were responding to. Now this is something completely, I'm not really understanding this process. Now something completely different is being presented that we can't see.
Okay, so it's not a point of order, it's a point of privilege, but we can, yeah, if you want to hold tight. Do we have a version that we can email to everybody?
And I'm just trying to understand the process because we're an advisory committee to the board. So now like something completely different is.
So I just want to,
presented.
sorry, can I just do one thing at a time? So do we have a copy of this to send out as we're discussing?
You mean the changes that we're
Yes.
suggesting?
Yes. Do we have something we can take a moment now to put together?
No,
so
I'm
members,
sorry.
that's okay.
I really thought this would work.
Okay.
Suggestion?
Sorry. I was going to say just from the fairly straightforward problem of visibility. If you're on Teams, you might be able to pull it up on your own computer or screen or your phone as well. It doesn't help, doesn't solve the problem, but it might make it a little closer for you in terms of visibility.
Do you have any other suggestions on how we can?
Okay, so if we could take that piece out. Yeah.
Yeah. Does everyone have access? Does everybody have access to email if we were to email that out right now? Or shared access? Okay, just give us a second.
Brenda?
Yes.
Question?
Yes.
Remember there were some edits that were done at the last meeting? Yeah. Can we get a side by side? Like I can't follow.
Let me just see what Andrea can pull up for sure, Emma. You're welcome. So my understanding too is in this, Emma, that the blue were the suggested, right? The suggested edits are the one in blue. So if we're not able to provide a side by side, when we send out the document, we have differentiated the changes by color to be able to see that.
Yeah, I was just gonna, no, that's good. So we could remove where it says assessment practices shall be fully accessible. And that's what I would recommend, just in for the sake of brevity and clarity.
Sorry, I don't think we've received the document.
Yeah, it's coming right
okay,
now.
I'm sorry, because I received something, but okay.
Yeah, it's here.
Didn't receive it. With the SEAC package, did you not receive this? Oh, it was in an email.
Okay, but here it is. So is everybody have access to it before we continue? I just want to make sure
the one I
you have
just
it.
clicked on that she just sent.
Okay, so sorry, I don't think I.
I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
it's here. It's there. I'm looking at it.
That's it. That's it.
No, but it's not though. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you mean it's a different?
Yeah,
attachment?
like it's. Okay. Wait.
That one right there. Yeah.
Everybody has it?
No. So what I have is what was sent to us previously. Sorry, and, but Superintendent Rossini is providing different wording. So do we have a copy of what she's?
It's just, I'm just talking you through it. And
Okay,
I-
but
It's
I
right
can't
there.
read it.
Okay. Right.
To join teams.
My apologies.
This is ridiculous. No. Okay, but but we're being presented something different, are we not? I'm really confused, sorry, I'm not understanding.
We took the feedback from the last SEAC meeting
Mm-hmm.
that was submitted to us. And so what we're proposing is that we marry that feedback to what is in the policy. And so the intent is exactly the same when you're talking about a student's individual accessibility needs. And that bullet that says assessment practices shall be fully accessible with consideration given to any known or potential accessibility issues included but not limited to, and then there's a listing. So we'll include a student's individual accessibility needs and remove that bullet.
Right, so if I'm understanding, you're recommending different wording than what's in this document that was sent to us. Is that correct?
No, I'm looking at exactly so you're suggesting, Suzanne, can you just identify again what you're suggesting based on what's here right now?
Because I don't see that wording in what was sent to me.
I'm suggesting that wording.
Okay. So we can do this live. So we can add this now, which is what we sometimes do sometimes at a policy meeting is we will be provided with a red line at a policy meeting. And then during the course of the policy meeting, if there are discussions around amendments to wording and whatnot, we'll do that on the screen. So I think in the spirit of just trying to have the conversation and get through some of the discussion, incorporating the feedback, perhaps what we can do is we can just follow those changes that are being suggested as they are happening on the screen.
If I can reiterate my point of privilege, because so last meeting, people weren't able to follow because it wasn't provided to them in advance. So it was sent out, redlined, so that people could know what was in the motion that was presented. And now we're back to providing something that people have not been provided in advance or a copy of that we can look at.
Okay, so what we can do then, if that's the case, if everyone feels the same way, we'll move this to the next SEAC meeting. Okay, so that means it'll just be possibly moved. I have to check again on when our policy meeting is, but I'm happy to do that. We can send another version out with another copy that has the suggested edits made in another color. We'll send that out. We'll move it to the next board.
Why can't we discuss what's already been gone out to members and have a discussion about that?
Because there was feedback that came back from members as part of this process. We're trying to incorporate that. And again, in the spirit of collaboration, if there was people here that wanted to incorporate things, we want to make sure that everybody has access to that information. And so you've made some proposed changes, staff has some proposed changes based on feedback from staff as well as other members, then let's just send out another document that captures all of that information in different versions and people can digest it. So whatever Superintendent Rossini is suggesting, we'll include that in green, whatever color that might be, we'll send that out and we can move this item to the next SEAC meeting so everybody has that document.
Can we ensure that we have everything in advance in time to review it and not present it at the meeting?
For sure. I will say for ease of use, I think the preference would be to not have back and forth conversations on email about the policy. So I think if we can we have the version that was sent based on the recommendations that were made last time. We have staff's original red line version. We'll have staff that will put their version in a different color of what you're suggesting as proposed changes. And everyone will have that. And then let's save that. You can certainly review it between now and the next SEAC meeting. Let's have that come to the next SEAC meeting so we can have the discussion there versus back and forth on email. I think it gets convoluted to sometimes try to follow that and know who's saying what. So I think that might be a better way to deal with it, if everybody's in agreement with that. Okay. So that's what we'll do. So we will move this item to the next SEAC agenda. And we'll send out the version that will have the suggested wording that you were going to provide this evening, Superintendent Rossini. Is that okay?
That was it.
Yeah, that's okay. But
That's the only suggested wording.
But in the spirit of transparency, if there's members who would like to see that version with your suggested wording in it, so that they have all their information, we can do that, and we'll just move it to the next SEAC meeting.
Are we asking for more input, or the input's over?
No. So what we're doing at this point is so you had something you wanted to suggest tonight based on feedback from members. We'll include that in the version. Yeah, Andrea, go ahead. Yes. Yeah, so we'll have to approach policy to have that also moved. But we'll have to speak with I'll have to speak with the chair of policy just to ensure that can be done. Does that work? So moving on to item number 7, we have review of input on special education plan. Thank you to everyone that was on the subcommittee. I'm going to call on Denise Colley and Jody O'Reilly if you wouldn't mind sharing the review of that input.
No problem. I'm going to start, but Denise certainly jump in. So thank you, SEAC members, for the feedback on the special education plan. We met, I think it was not last week, but the previous week as a subcommittee, which involved Oliver, Denise, myself, Suzanne, Andrea Jones, and Rick and Abiola. So thank you, Rick and Abiola, for being there. And we reviewed the feedback from SEAC. I have to say a majority of them were links that were not correct any longer. So thank you for going through those. It's a bit of an onerous task, but we want to make sure they're up to date. So those have been updated. And then there was one particular feedback about the number of students on non-identified IEPs. So in the spec ed plan, we do include numbers of students with an identified IEP with an exceptionality, but we don't have non-identified IEPs in that. So there was some good conversation about that. Does this reflect what the work of the department is doing and who we're supporting? So we are working with our SIS team members to see if we can pull that data to include into the special education plan. So we're continuing to work through that. If it won't be this year, I think it is something we're committed to doing because I think it does better reflect the work that we do in the department. And we had that good conversation with the subcommittee. And I think that was it from the feedback from SEAC. So I don't know, Rick or Abiola, if there's anything else you'd like to add about the meeting we had or any feedback.
Sorry, no, thanks, Jody. No, that was most of what I guess that was you mentioned was the broken links. I guess the ministry's done something with migrating their pages, so they severed a bunch of links there. And the only thing that jumped out at me when I was looking at at that table was the fact that there's more being done that's not really kind of captured in there in terms of how much many students are actually accessing the services that the board provides. So just wanted that maybe if it's possible. I know there was some issue about multiple exceptionalities and numbers and making sure the right numbers were shown and reflected. But other than that, I think it's look fine for me. So, thanks.
Okay. No problem. So a red line version will be shared prior to our May 3rd. I'm going to say our May SEAC meeting, May 30th. I think Andrew's nodding yes. That will also include a summary of the changes that were made, including SEAC's recommendations for your review. And then there will be an opportunity on the agenda to discuss the spec ed plan at that time at our May meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone, and thank you for those who participated on the subcommittee. Very much appreciated. Was there any questions at all about the information just presented? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Action and information, sorry, I did it. Okay, so item number 7.2, review guiding principles to build credibility, mutual respect, and a spirit of collaboration section of the SEAC guidelines and code of conduct. So as you know, this conversation did happen at last meeting, and I think it might have been even the meeting prior where we sort of touched on it. An email was sent out to all of the members requesting some feedback and some suggested rewording on the bullet, which spoke to individual or personal experiences. The majority of members did prefer to edit the wording, and it was preferred to edit the wording to say members are welcome to share lived experiences provided that they do so without identifying people and focus on the issue. So that was, like I said, that was the majority of the SEAC members who did support changing the wording to that particular wording. Does anyone want to ask any questions about that?
Yeah, I do, because I find that wording confusing, and I understand that that's the pretty much everybody voted who did vote on that. But I do find that wording confusing. So how do I talk about a lived experience? Because as soon as I say in my experience, I've identified myself, and it's not hard to figure out who else I might be talking about. So I'd sent out another suggestion and there was no feedback to that, but I just find that wording confusing. I don't think it's clear. So can you maybe like give me an example of how someone would do that?
I can't. Does somebody else want to give an example, or does anybody have any other feedback on?
I don't see an issue with it, so I don't understand the confusion.
Well, if I say my lived experience, you know, I'm talking about myself, right?
But you can identify yourself as a lived experience and say, in my experience, I've experienced. I mean, I'm not naming somebody else. Obviously, it might happen at a school. It might involve a student, but like we have to use some common sense that we can't overanalyze it, dig into it too far, because now it just becomes something that's too abstract. Like it's not, if we're here to talk about the experiences we've had that can help shape programs, policies, etc. So I don't think there's an issue in actually identifying that. So I just don't understand what the confusion is.
Sorry, I don't know how else to explain it.
Does anybody else have any comments at all?
Yeah, I think it was our last meeting, Maria, and I didn't know this about you because I've known you a long time too, but you were saying something about your first language was Portuguese. So, I mean, that's a lived experience, right, that you shared with us. I think it would be, if we're starting to get into, you know, last year at Saint whatever, and this teacher did that, that's where we stop, right? But we relate through experiences. And you could relate to what they were saying about with doing an assessment, right? If it's not your first language. So it's a conversation, and I think it helps us narrow it down to what we're trying to, whether it's about assessments or whether it's about IEPs. But we're all fairly educated, well-spoken people. We're sitting around here, right? I think we could use our discretion and our common sense.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, and yes, certainly in some cases, like that's not, I don't see why that would be an issue. But if I say in my experience, you know, with a gifted child in the system, this is what happens. Like, it's pretty clear I'm talking about my son. I guess I'm talking about more situations like that, but that's fine. If everybody's happy with the wording, it's out of the record. I think that it's a bit confusing and could lead to some gray areas, which I think the clearer and more straightforward it is, the easier it is to implement. That's my feedback. So obviously I'm alone in that, so I'll leave it at that.
So what we can do is we can go ahead based on member feedback, and we can make that amendment to the guideline. Should there be a desire, you know, we do review our board policies on a regular cycle, right? They're in a policy cycle review. If we feel that, you know, things are getting out of hand, if we feel that the guidelines are actually not meeting the needs of what's happening here, if we find that there needs to be, I mean, that's how the code of conduct sort of conversation came to be initially, is that there was members that felt that we needed to have some guiding principles. So in the event that we feel like it needs to be revised or revisited or refreshed or whatever that might be, there's certainly always an opportunity at that point, perhaps next fall, we bring that forward for review, or we take a look at what the annual piece is, or whatever we decide we want to do, and we can, it's never closed for discussion, but I just think so that we can close the loop on that particular issue that had come forward, that we could probably move ahead with this wording. So we can go ahead and make the changes to the guidelines based on member feedback. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm moving along to item number 8, which is board committee update from SEAC representatives. So the first one is 8.1, which is the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Committee. Andrea, Lucarici, do you want to fill us in?
So we have our next meeting this Wednesday, where we will talk about any feedback brought forward about the plan. Andrea would have sent out a note seeking feedback, so that's been gathered. So if anybody has any feedback to add today, I can incorporate that and bring it back to the committee this week.
And everybody would have received that? Just want to make sure.
It was pre-mailed out to everybody. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward pieces of feedback. There's nothing in there that's contentious or anything.
So when would you like that, Andrea, like a drop dead time?
Oh, no, I mean, the feedback, the drop dead date for the feedback was already. It's just if you're in this moment right now, if you want to take a couple of minutes, if anybody has any additional feedback that you wanted to talk through or didn't get a chance to note it, feel free to share and I can capture that now.
Sorry, if I could, yeah, I did. I'm now on that committee, I think, and I don't think I received any information from you on the anti-bullying and the feedback.
Members. So if you're on the distribution list, it wouldn't have come through the Bullying and Prevention Intervention Committee email, Chris. It would have come through a SEAC email. Yeah. You wanted to add, Andrea?
I don't have anything to add. I mean, thank you. I see Mandy submitted feedback. I went through and added some comments as well. So
perfect.
The plan looked good to me. Generally, there's just some minor things that I added in there in terms of suggestions. I don't know if you have an interest in going through it. I'm not going to put you through that. I mean, you received the feedback by email, but they're just minor tweaks. Do you want me to walk through it in more detail?
Received it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's good. I just want to remind people too that, you know, we have representatives on numerous committees and those are always evolving and changing. And anytime, you know, I think we try to do a decent job at the board table to try to ensure that there's representation from numerous committees, be it CPIC, be it SEAC, whoever that might be. So we do see participation on those committees, again, evolving, increasing. So, you know, remember that, and we can, again, I know we've sent it out previously, but we can send it out again to remind our SEAC members of who their SEAC member is their SEAC member representative is on particular committees. And you can at any time reach out to that representative and say, listen, you know, you're on the Bullying Prevention Intervention Committee. You know, could you mention this, or could you, you know, so utilize your representatives on those committees for feedback that you'd like to see brought to that committee. Just it's not specific to this one, Andrea, but while you were speaking, I just wanted people to know that because our SEAC reps do a fantastic job when they're on those committees representing the interests of SEAC and our various community partners. So just wanted to put that out there. Thanks so much, Andrea. The second one is the de-streaming committee. Is that still a thing, Maria?
So I just got an update that apparently after Catholic Education Week, we're going to be getting an invitation to the next meeting. So in the meantime, there hasn't been anything. Journeying with Jesus, I think that I think that committee has finished meeting. I think they're all ready to go with the event. So I joined it a bit late, but I did have the opportunity to, and I think I already shared this before, just to make sure that they were being aware, being inclusive, that the event would be accessible to all of our students with different needs and they really did appreciate that feedback. They took that really well, and so that was nice, but not too much more to say on that. But I do have another question, and it ties in with what you were just saying. I like the idea of sharing who our reps are because, yeah, like as I've been on some of these committees in the past and currently, and I would love to hear from other members because it should be about bringing forward from the whole committee, not just the SEAC person who's on that committee. We do represent this whole group here. But I also noticed, I was looking at the CPIC agenda the other day, and they seem to be on a whole bunch of committees that we're not, I don't think we are, and I don't remember it being, us being asked if we want to participate. So I don't know if I missed something, but there's the homeschool parish partnership, focus on faith, the strategic plan, which is a pretty big one, and school year calendar, which probably is done now, but I'm just wondering about those if there's an opportunity for SEAC.
I mean, there's always an opportunity for SEAC if a committee has been, so there could be a couple of different things, and I'll be fully transparent. We don't always get volunteers. So there could have been, and this is not, blaming or anything. There very well could have been an invite that may have gone out and nobody put their hand up, resulting in no representation on the committee. That has happened previously. But for those other ones, we can certainly look into it. I have Director Klein sitting here to my left, but I would absolutely assume that we would be on anything to do with strategic planning. If it has to do with the board-wide strat planning, that we would have SEAC there. But what we can do is I'll take a look at what those committees are. I'll do another review of the existing committees that are out there that we do have CPIC representation on, and try to ensure that we have SEAC representation as well. So if you want to follow up with that and you want to send them, the ones that you have available, send those. And we can still see, are they running? Are they still happening? Sounds like they are if they're on CPIC agendas. And then, assuming we didn't have someone to sit on them previously, that perhaps we can put another call out for someone to participate. Is there any other questions on the committee piece? No? Okay. Moving on to item number 9, we have communications to SEAC. So I'll pass this back over to Superintendent Rossini for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. World Autism Awareness Day was Sunday, April 2nd, and this year's theme was Celebrate the Spectrum. Autism Ontario created activities and educator toolkits to use to celebrate throughout the month of April. We sent a memo to all the schools with links to the activities and an educator toolkit, and schools celebrated on Monday, April 3rd by wearing their blue shirts. The gifted class, in addition to regular education classes at Our Lady of Victory, participated in a Minecraft STEAM competition. The essential skills classes participated in HCDSB skills competition event at St. FX on Friday, March 24th. Students in grades 7 and 8 competed in 4 skills competitions. We had pathway itinerants, special education, itinerant certs, and itinerant EAs help to facilitate the skills competition event. Structured teaching classes participated in the event at their homeschool sites. The itinerant certs and itinerant EAs put together an HCDSB skill competition skill bin for the STC classes that included 5 activities. We held the following open houses for our structured teaching classes. In Oakville, it was April 13th, in Burlington, April 18th, and in Milton, April 20th. There are 2 changes to our specialized classes for the 23-24 school year. As you are aware, our department reviews our specialized classes yearly, looking at the number of students in each of our specialized classes, as well as incoming students and current and projected staffing complement. This year, we're happy to be opening an additional community living class at the temporary location of St. Teresa in Oakville. The goal is to secure a space in Milton over the next couple of years so as to maintain 1 community living class in the south and 1 community living class in the north. We will also be amalgamating the 2 structured teaching classes at St. Rafe's into 1 structured teaching class for the 23-24 school year. The Student Awards of Excellence were held on March 27th, where our Spirit of Inclusion winners were recognized. Thank you to our Vice Chair, Rick, for attending. The Life Skills Track and Field Meet will take place at Assumption Catholic Secondary School. This meet is open to all students in the Life Skills program and on any other students who may benefit from participation on this day. The date of this event is Wednesday, May 31st, and all SEAC members are welcome and invited to attend. All events are developmentally appropriate, with the event taking place both indoors and outdoors. All track events will take place on the track and field, and field events will take place in the gym. Schools are welcome to include their best buddies on this exciting day. The SEA team will be hosting a SEA Showcase event on June 7th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Corpus Christi Secondary School. DJ and Rick Cunningham will do a keynote from 7 till 8. Student Ignite grant winners will be there to share their submissions and stories. The SEA team would like to invite any associations who want to share technology resource they may offer to families a table at the event. Please let Andrea Hughes know if you're interested and she'll connect with you with the SEA team to discuss participation. All community members and SEAC members are welcome to attend. We look forward to seeing you there. The Ignite grant is for any individual student with SEA technology in grades 4 to 12 plus. Through video submissions, students were invited to share their experiences using SEA equipment, the impact SEA equipment has had on their learning, or ways SEA training has enhanced their education. Winners across the system are chosen as Ignite grant recipients. Under professional development, 2 sessions for special topics in FASD were held. The first focused on parent perspectives on FASD, which was supported by SEAC member Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, who spoke to staff with Carol Gauthier, another parent from the Halton community. The second was a presentation by Ginny Fazzari, the FASD consultant from ROC, who presented on models for managing behavioral symptoms of FASD. Both presentations had approximately 60 staff in attendance. Jody O'Reilly, our special education coordinator, and Simone Taramy, our EA manager, presented to school administrators on Thursday, March the 30th. Jody co-presented with the curriculum department on supports in the curriculum classroom, and Simone presented on the debrief process following an incident with SC17s. Jody O'Reilly, again, you're a very busy lady. Special education coordinator, attended a joint D-Stream contacts and special education leads meeting hosted by the ministry. The ministry was interested in hearing from school boards about their experiences with D-streaming and special education so far. And under the heading of mental health and well-being, the student mental health champions met for a second time on March 31st at St. Francis Xavier. The students are working on a planned project for their school, which they will implement with the support of administrators and staff mental health champions. The students will also make a video with the broad theme being information that they would like adults to know regarding mental health. Schools received mental health funding dedicated to supporting the student mental health initiatives, and they'll be reporting back on how they used the money and implemented their initiatives. The Mental Health Awareness Week resource kit is being shared in a memo going out to all staff celebrating Mental Health Awareness Week, May 1st to 7th. It provides activities, announcements, and resources. It is celebrated during the same week as Catholic Education Week, and schools may choose to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Week during another time. And finally, we had our second Mental Health Advisory Committee meeting on March 22nd. We shared updates related to the Mental Health and Addictions Annual Action Plan, along with hearing from student representatives and community partners. Our last meeting of the year is on June the 7th. Sounds like it's been a pretty busy month for us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Is there any questions on the superintendent's report? Well, good. Thank you very much. Next up, we do have the trustee report. So I will invite Trish to present us with that report.
Thank you. Actually, can I just ask you, Superintendent Rossini, when was the Ignite, the SEA, did you mention the date for that?
It'll be June the 7th.
Okay.
June the 7th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Corpus Christi.
Okay. I'm sure communication will be coming out.
Yes.
It's busy. So thank you. Okay. So just a review of April from our meetings. Actually, we didn't have one meeting the week of Easter. The week of Good Friday, we didn't have a board meeting, so we just had a policy and a regular board meeting. We had quite a few updates from staff in terms of education development charges presentations. We had budget reports, capital project report, long-term capital, and construction reports done. But there's some interesting things that came out of Director Klein's report. So we have special education services are offering the summer learning program.
that will be in person from July 4th to 21st at Our Lady of Victory in Milton. And that's a morning half-day program. Pilot program for grade 11 as an alternative to grade 11 English. The Ministry of Education has developed a course titled English Understanding Contemporary First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Voices. And there are 4 high schools that'll be offering this in the 2023-2024 school year. That was neat. Some highlights that Director Klein shared with us from the minister's teleconference was that there are, extension of ministry funding for tutoring. That's extended to July 31st, 2023. That the education priorities are on early reading strategy. There's a lot of money going towards that, using a consistent set of screening tools with mandatory use in all the boards. New language curriculum, math strategy. There was over 12 million funded for that, doubling the number of math coaches and de-streamed grade 9 math. And expansion of dual credit programs with focus on health and wellness. Support for students with disabilities, $6 million to support cooperative learning opportunities for students who have aged out of school. And we had a really robust student trustee update. They have a lot on their plate. So one really cool thing was the Holy Trinity robotics team qualified for the very first robotics world championship in Houston, Texas. And they won a gracious professionalism award. One of only 6 teams awarded that. One of only 6 team awards. Oh, one of only 6 team awards. Okay, there were 6 awards. Thank you. And they were nominated by the other teams. So that really says a lot about the students that were part of that. So they're on their way home, I believe. Right? Yeah. And March 30th, the General Student Senate meeting, the Student Senate Spec Ed Subcommittee passed their Best Buddies survey and another one called Every Student, Every Opportunity, Embracing IEPs. And it's a proposal, and they want to send out a series of posts, each with the purpose of ending the stigma surrounding IEPs. They will bring up topics like, why do people have IEPs? What is the importance of taking away the stigma around IEPs? So bravo to them, and look forward to seeing that and sharing that. And that's about it from that is it from us. So, that's all, folks. Okay.
Thank you so much. Is there any questions at all on the trustee report? Good. Okay. Thank you so much. So moving on to make sure I'm not missing anything. Moving on to item number 10 is our SEAC discussion / questions. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add or discuss? Jessica, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to make this concise. I just wasn't sure how to ask this question. So as we all understand in the SPEC plan, there's a process for external psych reports to be brought into the board, especially for the ones who are identified at an external board. Now, in our plan, it lists the mandatory components of a professional assessment, as well as the types and board's thresholds for certain criteria. Now, I'm bringing forward a concern because ABC continues to hear from parents that without a proper IEPRC, a board personnel would tell them in a one-way communication that due to their age, the child does not meet the criteria. I'm just wondering if this is a misunderstanding somewhere along the way, because I thought that's not how our board was identifying gifted students. So I'm raising this question here because I wasn't sure if I should be asking Jody or Suzanne.
So I can yeah, thanks. I can field this to, I can put this through Superintendent Rossini if you want to pass it on to someone else, if you want to answer that.
The question is around gifted, sorry, it was just a long one. What is the question? Sorry.
So in the SPEC plan for the gifted identification, it just lists what type of an assessment, like the Canadian norms and the criteria for it. So when an external report is completed, which meets all those things, the school team would advise the parent that the board personnel said that this identification cannot happen. We'll just create you an IEP because your child is too young. That's my question. Is this something that's happening throughout the board, or is this a miscommunication due to certain board personnel?
That I don't know. I'd have to look into it. Do you know, have some
You want to
background,
jump in,
Jody?
Well, I can attempt. I also think Oliver's on the line. I'll check first to see is he not on the line?
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I
He
apologize.
was on the line for a bit. No, that's okay. I thought I'd start there, but I can address a little bit.
Oliver, can you hear us okay? Are you?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, Oliver.
Okay. I can answer the question that was just asked. It is in general the process at this board to identify children with giftedness under the category of the exceptionality of intellectual giftedness through our grade 4 process, as is the process in a lot of other boards. And I can't speak to specific incidents or specific students, obviously, here. I can say that when we review all the reports that we get from outside providers, we review those under developmental considerations. And so if parents ask us, we advise them that we have our process in grade 4. And if parents choose to do assessments, go on their own and have private assessments done at an earlier time, then we consider those assessments for programming and in terms of the needs of the students. But as it is case for other exceptionalities as well, we always consider the age of the student and the time that the assessment was done. And from our professional knowledge in terms of developmental changes. And so it could be that there is a case where an assessment was taking place at an earlier time, and we would want to see another assessment to see if the child would still meet criteria at the time when we make those decisions for identification.
Up to that, yeah. Just a follow-up coming through, Oliver. Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't think you've answered a question that I asked. I think I'm going to request a separate meeting, maybe perhaps with the psychology department and Superintendent Rossini, if that's okay, because I don't think he's answering the question. There's no age threshold for identifying giftedness, especially if this is done by another professional psychologist, correct?
I think it would not be appropriate to discuss this in this meeting. I think it would be good to have a separate meeting to discuss this in detail. But I can tell you that yes, we have an age threshold for identification of giftedness in our board, as have a lot of other boards.
So, Jessica, do you want me to just leave that with you then to follow up on that piece? Okay, thank you. Brea, you have a question?
So I did have another question, but I just want to just make a little bit of commentary as well on the question that was just answered. It's very concerning, the response to me. Nothing in our spec ed plan says, and I understand Jessica doesn't want to waste take everybody's time. I don't think it's inappropriate to be at this meeting, but I do understand that a more fulsome conversation can take place outside. There is no age threshold in any of the ministry documents. I'm not aware of a single board that has an age threshold in their education plan, spec ed plan. Ours does not. Spec ed is K to 12. And I understand that there's universal testing in grade 4, but if a child has needs, they should be referred just like any other child. And if a parent's bringing forward an external assessment, that has nothing to do with grade 4 universal testing. So there was a lot of things there that were concerning, and we can take it offline, but I wanted to comment on those because those were stated here in this public meeting, and those are really problematic. And it has to do with unidentified students receiving IEP. So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there are students who have not been identified through an IPRC that have IEPs for different reasons. We have them in our board, and provincially there's quite a lot. It's actually bigger in other boards, I know that. But I've had a parent come to me because they've been told by the principal that you can't have an IEP without an identification. I have brought this forward before in the past, similar to this issue of we won't identify your child because they're too young. And so these are systemic issues. And sure, we can, the board can deal with the individual cases, but why does this keep happening? Like, why does staff not know? These are big problems. And how do we address them systemically? Well, I guess one question would be what do I tell this parent? Because I know, and if this parent, okay, what do I tell this parent? Because if what the principal's told them is not correct, so I'd like to know how to tell them to proceed. But the bigger issue is, like, sure, they know me, so I know the act, and I can tell them, no, that's not right. But most parents, whatever the principal tells them, they will accept as true, as they should, because the principal should know. So why do we have principals telling parents things that are not correct? How do we fix that? So I guess there's more than one question. There's an immediate issue, and then there's a bigger problem.
Have the parent, I'm just curious, Maria. So it sounds like the parents have met with the school team to have these conversations.
So again, I don't want to get into too much detail on an individual case, but my understanding, the parent has identified needs. The teacher has also recognized needs. They don't want to go through the identification process for various reasons. And again, I don't want to get too much into the specific details, but I said, yeah, but you can still have an IEP, right? You can still have an IEP to meet their needs. You don't need it. So they approached the principal. I don't know the whole school team, that side of it, that much detail, but they approached the principal, and the answer was can't have an IEP with an identification. I know that statement's not correct.
Yeah, Maria, I'm sympathetic to that. So that idea of IPRC is not the only way to head toward an IEP is in fact true, and other boards do operate that way. I would say one reminder: if somebody thinks the principal's final word is it, and well, clearly not, because they're asking you about this, right? And you're well versed in policy as well. I would say that the policy of the board is then go to the superintendent and ask them too. And really, it's not unusual for superintendents or anybody to get questions, particularly when they're, framed and, with respect and kindly, and just say, look, I'm just wondering, this is what this is what I heard. I've heard that that's not necessarily the case. Can you help me out?
Okay, maybe just a suggestion before you. The other piece too is I know that there have been incidences that have happened, not specific to this, but where there may have been a breakdown in communication, whether that might have been explaining to somebody the IPRC IEP process, or resources that are available to them, or placement options, all of those things. And I'm not saying that this is the perfect solution. Every situation is individualized, but I know that the team, and I'm going over this to Jody, I know that they try to do a really great job about bringing some of these reminders forward. And so perhaps there's an opportunity there, and I'm giving benefit of the doubt. Perhaps there's a misunderstanding, perhaps whatever that might be. But I know that, one element of that could just be from a system-wide perspective, so that we ensure this is not happening in other schools. And as a reminder to that particular principal, that, maybe Jody, and again, I don't want to put this on your plate, but perhaps a reminder to all of the teams to say, FYI, in case you were not aware, this is the practice, or whatever I don't want to tell you what to say. That could be one piece of addressing that as a system, because we do know we get communication breakdowns. They happen inadvertently sometimes. But anyways, just a thought for one solution to try to move it forward.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can I add Brenda? Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we do have principal carousels where special education does, as Suzanne shared today, different topics that are of interest to the principals. But certainly if we hear, we often take what's happening here at SEAC and take this feedback. And if we think there is a topic that would be beneficial to be presented to our principals, then we would consider putting together a presentation on that. We do that yearly. So this is perhaps something, a spec ed 101. Sometimes these things are said, and I wonder too if it is a matter of miscommunication, because I'm sure that is principal 101, and I'm sure that, there might be something there and we're not sure. And so again, going back to superintendent, we also have consultants that help support schools, and they're often can help navigate that with parents as well when needed. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, so I just want to address some of what Director Klein shared, and I appreciate all that. And certainly I can assure you, I was never afraid to escalate as I needed. In fact, I emailed Superintendent Rossini. I didn't know she had retired at the beginning of my journey. So I appreciate that. I guess a couple of things though that I do want to say is, not everybody would question the principal, right? They would assume that the principal knows. So unless they have a reason to not think that that's right. A lot of parents don't want to rock the boat. I mean, that is paramount. And quite often, and I will say when I did email the superintendent, that did cause me some trouble at the school level. And a lot of times what happens, and Jessica will know, by the time parents come to us, they've been through so much, they are done. They don't want to rock the boat. Sometimes they're done with HCDSB. They're moving on. Like they've already been through it all. By the time they come to us, right? They're so past the point that it's kind of too late. So it's really critical that everybody understand all the options, right? Because I mean, another thing, and I don't know if Jessica mentioned this, but another thing that sometimes happens is they'll say, and I know I had this, you can't have an IPRC without a diagnosis or a psych ed or whatever. That's not true either. Like if a parent wants an APRC and they ask for it, the board has to do it. Like that's in the legislation too. So there's a few things that we hear from time to time, and they just sort of keep coming. So like I appreciate, you can't control what every single person is saying out there, but just think we need to work on everybody. Yeah, consistency and everybody being aware of exactly what the rules are.
Okay, thank you. Was there any other items that anyone wanted to bring forward with respect to SEAC discussion?
Thank you, Brenda. Trustee Agnew, sorry. So I came across an article recently about student climate survey, I guess, and actually you were quoted in it, and it was about I guess how safe students felt in school, and I kind of twinged to it because it said that I think it was don't quote me, it's 35% of students with exceptionalities felt unsafe in schools in Halton Catholic, and that number is way too high, in my opinion. And I don't know if there's a way to bring, like it's not in this, not in today's agenda, but I should have mentioned this when I first read it. But I thought about it now. Is there a way to bring that survey as a report, or as a presentation to SEAC so we can maybe discuss? I mean, not detailed information, but aggregate data for like what's the problem is, what they're feeling unsafe about, what we can maybe look at to help them not feel unsafe in school, what we can do to kind of alleviate those numbers that's just high. So that's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
And thank you for bringing that up, because this information came to us probably about 3 weeks ago around the student census. And I think what you're saying is at the secondary level, the 35%, I believe it's a secondary level. So we presented to, we had research present to special education staff. Jody and Denise were there, and a group of us just breaking down just the data around the disability piece, and children or young adults who identified as having a disability, and specifically in what area. And so we just presented the information about 2 weeks ago, and we're meeting again on Wednesday to take a look and talk about what does that 35% mean? What are the subgroups within the 35%? Are we talking about a group of students who identify their disability as anxiety or ADHD or mental health? And what are the larger groups within that 35%? And it's not just safety at school. It was a positive image at school, and it was some other factors that they were measuring. So if SEAC is interested in in just an overview of what those results are, because what we are doing right now is saying, okay, what questions do we need to ask? What does that 35% mean? It's alarming. And we wanted to get to the bottom of some of that data. So that's where we're at in breaking it down, because we need to know what those subgroups are. So certainly, yeah.
Jessica?
Thank you. Piggybacking on that. So I'm definitely interested what the questions were on the survey, but without identifying students. Were there any actual subjective comments related to the questions so that we can gain a better understanding of why they were feeling unsafe? I think if those can be presented without identifying students, I think that would be very insightful.
For sure. And we can grab those, Jessica. They would have been part of our board package. So they're information we can gather. We were presented sort of with the themes of the feedback. So the two that came forward, one was accessibility, and one was they felt that there was some issues around education and not understanding what the needs are of those learners. And so, yeah, so definitely we can have that put together. And I know it's different, but I was going to get to the next thing. We are having an exercise at our next board meeting where we're going to have some discussion and engagement and feedback to provide feedback on the multi-year strategic plan. So, and the reason I bring that up is because that is going to be one mechanism that will be utilized to try to address some of these gaps that may exist with respect to that census survey data. But yeah, absolutely. We can definitely reach out to the research department and have that information presented sort of more concise as it would pertain to our group for sure, and have that shared or even presented. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing that forward, Rick. Is there any other questions on that? We'll make a note on that. Okay, great. So I just wanted to also mention, it was a bit of a labor of love, but we have secured Dr. Joy Lawson to speak virtually on May the 30th. So as you recall, that was, we were looking to do a SEAC speaker, and we had a couple of different names that went out to the SEAC members for them to give their feedback on who. I had the loveliest conversation with her about a week and a half, it was make it 2, but it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. Great conversation. She's going to put together some ideas. We talked a lot about the work she's done with intersectionality. It's a huge passion of hers. And so she's going to provide sort of a context with which she'll be speaking to, but where she's kind of leaning is going to be around intersectionality, students who are identified, multiple exceptionalities, and really taking a look at the impact of that work. So anyways, we had a lovely conversation. She is great. I think people are going to absolutely love her. We are scheduling enough time so that we have some time for some questions. So we'll determine all the logistics of that. So the next step will be for us to connect with communications so that we can do all of the promotion and information to get that out. But that has been secured, and that's off my plate. So I'm happy about that. Again, she was an excellent person to speak to. I mean, I've heard her speak in presentations, but not personally. She was lovely. Is there any questions at all on that? Yes. Joel. Yes, we're gonna do it virtually. It'll be an evening. I can't remember the exact time that we said, but like a 6:30, 7 o'clock start kind of thing in the evening. And we'll do it virtually. It'll be recorded. We have our permission to record. So we'll be able to record that and put that on our YouTube channel after for those who can't attend. Okay, so I mentioned back when we were just talking about the census survey about the multi-year strategic plan, as people may or may not know, we're engaged in that process right now. It's a big responsibility of trustees. It's sort of one of our primary responsibilities. So we're going through our multi-year strategic plan, and part of that does involve meeting with numerous stakeholders, us being one of them. And so we do have an external facilitator that is assisting us. They're helping to guide the development of our next multi-year strategic plan. So we are looking to launch the consultation phase of this process, and we'll be seeking feedback from stakeholders I mentioned. We have to set aside some time on the May 29th SEAC agenda for this multi-year strategic plan. The facilitators will lead the committee through an engagement activity and would need about 60 to 75 minutes. So we recognize that this is last minute. We try to give everybody enough time in advance for your planning. It is a significant amount of time, but we really want to capture the unique perspective that SEAC has to offer. So I actually think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be involved in this. So my ask of you is, could we start the meeting at 6:30? That particular meeting, just to give ourselves that extra half an hour. We have a lot because we also do have a presentation from finance, but we can move our SEA presentation to another time to accommodate this request. So does that work for everybody, that 6:30? Great. Okay, wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. So we'll make a note of that so people are aware. You can put in your calendar. Meeting summary and next steps. We have a couple of things we've identified that we need to follow up and get out to everyone. Yes, Maria?
I was just wondering, originally the SEA presentation was scheduled for tonight, as well as the after school skills development program. So I'm just wondering what happened to those and if they've been rescheduled, because it looks like the next couple meetings are pretty full too. So
yeah, they've been rescheduled. They won't fall off. They'll just be moved to another meeting, as I said. So SEA, it's hard for us to move anything now to the June meeting. The June meeting is usually a recap, as we know. So, you know, it may end up being where we'll have to move some of those items to our fall agendas, but they won't fall off. They'll just move to another meeting. So, yeah.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes.
It looks like there's a hand up there.
We don't actually take questions from people who are not part of the committee. So what I would suggest is, yeah, if anyone has a question that might be online right now that is invited to attend, that they send us that question or just reach out to us for that information. Okay, so item number 12, is there any other questions on meeting summary and next steps? No? Okay, so moving on to item number 12, which is the next agenda. As I mentioned, the May agenda will include the multi-year strategic plan consultation and engagement activity, a budget presentation, and the special education plan summary of changes. Okay. Right, and policy will be moved in there. That's okay, we'll be fine. We'll be good. Okay, so moving on to item number 13, which is the resolution for absentees. We do have two regrets this evening for Mandy Alker and Amanda D'Amato. So if I could just get a resolution to excuse those members, if I can get someone to move that.
I'll move it.
Moved by Rick, and can I get someone to second that? Sorry. Oh, and seconded by Trish. Okay, great. So moving on to item number 14, which is our adjournment and closing prayer. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Trish, seconded by?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Rick. Thank you so much. And if you will join me in the sign of our faith as we have our closing prayer in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family, created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care with which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students and families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work, so that it may always be said of our every act, God saw that it was good. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, everybody, for a fantastic meeting. We will see you next meeting.